the very first thing you guys are typically going to do is set up the control flash and get some firmware into that controller. All right, so we got it set up. Now what we got to do is we need to first make sure that we can browse and see the device. So to set up, I always like to use the USB first. What I need to do is get it back so that you can see it. We're going to connect my USB to my virtual machine and click on a different driver. Now, as soon as you do, it should pick up, and there is my controller. Now, the one thing Hayden was also showing, in the simulator, you can have multiple devices hanging off of that Ethernet port. One thing that they built into the Micro850 also, more particularly for an OEM type environment, is you can see the controller, but if you have the Ethernet port set up, whatever else is outside of there, it'll allow you to browse through. So even though I'm connected to only the USB port, I can navigate through the USB onto the Ethernet, and then anything else that's connected, you can configure it all through the USB with just one shortcut. Just wanted to bring that out just as a nice kind of touching point. But now that we guarantee we could see the controller in Link's browser, we're actually going to pull up Control Flash Plus. So when Control Flash typically brings up, you're not going to have the device here. So you're going to hit your Who's Active button, the same as RS Links previously. But Control Flash uses FactoryTalk Link's browser, which is the newer platform. From there, you'll be able to select the driver you want to use and pick the device. We're going to click OK. This is a little bit different than Control Flash previously. So there's a couple of reasons. It allows you to connect to Download Center. So if you don't have everything you want, right? So I'm connected to the controller, and I have version 12, 11, and 10 locally on this computer. But if you see the little arrows, if you wanted to flash it to an older revision at this point, there's nothing that would stop you. It'll quickly download it for you without you having to go to the Rockwell site and do it. That's one of the advantages that comes with Control Flash Plus. One other thing that I want to point out is it is very important that you try and flash to the highest revision. So one major difference in comparison to a lot of the older setups is the firmware of the controller and the firmware being used on your computer, so your connected components, does not necessarily have to match. So the firmware, as long as the firmware of the controller is newer than what the programming revision is, you could still use it. This is different than everything for 5000, where you had to have the same firmware. The other thing I forgot to point out is there are some firmware revisions that came out with a Series A and a Series B, but others are single. If you need to move to one that has an A and a B, do not try and use the one that doesn't have a revision, because they put patches and things like that in these other ones, so you'd want to use the newest one potentially. Once you'd select that, you'd hit next. It would say okay, and you'd begin flashing. I'm going to go ahead and not do the flash just because it takes a little bit too long. And we're going to just go ahead and bring up a program that we already had. So I currently have a controller that's plugged in, and to show you, this controller project was created in version 8. But as I showed you, I had it flashed to 12. So you can go here to Properties. So you see how the controller revision is 12? It doesn't matter. We can easily go up here to Connect, and it will allow us to connect to the controller, even though the revision of the software created was not the same.